Hello, world. You're listening to Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, where we're always creeping it real. I'm your host, Eleanor Wagner.
I'm so excited because it just so happens that this episode is my anniversary episode. It's been 1 year since my first show, and I have quite an adventure planned. First off, I have my good friend and astrologist Carol Starr here to start us off with this show with a bit of futuristic enlightenment, and then we'll go on to the regular programmed episode. So without further ado, welcome Carol. Tell me what the good news is.
I just have to spend just a few words on Mercury's retrograde, up in another 2 weeks of it, folks. The ones who are feeling it the most are the Virgos and the Geminis, because Mercury rules those. But there's nothing serious and nothing terrible is going to happen. But if your computer breaks down or your printer breaks down or you don't get a phone call you're supposed to, it happens a lot. And I know this stuff happens all year long, but trust me, in these next few weeks, be aware that phone calls aren't going to get answered. People aren't going to call you back and you're going to get annoyed, but you're going to be okay afterwards.
And why do you say that is? Why does that happen?
Well, Mercury, the planet, appears to be going backwards, and it kind of moves backwards. So it is the planet, it was the god of communications. So everything with communications gets affected, which of course is our computers, our telephones, our conversations, misunderstandings between people. It just happens. And even if you don't know astrology well, most people, you know what I'm talking about when I tell you Mercury is retrograde. And I have a lot of Virgo in my chart, and I want to tell you something. I want to go hide under the bed. My computer stuff is going on. And nothing serious. And everything's fine, but a lot of issues.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you so much, Carol, for sharing your insight with us today. Would you please let the listeners know exactly how they can reach you if they want to get a personal reading from you?
I'm so excited. I have my new website up. It's so easy. carolstarastrologer.com. You can't get easier than that. And I have a variety of offerings. I have written reports. I have videos. I have telephone conversations. I'm really excited about it. And so check it out and let's see if we can help you get unstuck and get your lives in order. If you got some problems, I can help.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, is star STARR or is it STR?
Yes, Carol.
R.
Yeah, that's it. Astrology.
So remember that, listeners, it's a double R. So you put that in when you're...
Yeah, they won't find me otherwise.
Welcome to my paranormal closet where all the magic happens. I'm pleased to announce that my eldest child, Viktoria-Leigh, is here to help co-host this extraordinary episode. So thanks, Tor, for taking time out of your already busy schedule to participate.
Thank you so much, Ma. It's nice to be here.
Today's guest has quite a colorful resume. He is English-born and both a Canadian and United States veteran who has worked with Native peoples on spiritual matters. He's had alternate reality experiences and lives his life according to his astrological chart. He even met the Dalai Lama of Tibet and the Maharaj Guru of India. And this summary only scratches the surface. Help me give a warm welcome to Richard Clarkson. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Richard, you and I met, oddly enough, when you responded to a post I had on social media about ghost stories in Lake Hopakong. Since then, we found that we connect on many other levels. I remember immediately giving you my birth information along with some other information for you to reach into your prize bag to see what you could come up with about me and to see if our collaboration was a good match, all in the good name of astrology. Astrology is important to you, so I would very much like it if you would go ahead and give the listeners a brief introduction on astrology, if you will.
Well, I certainly can give you a brief introduction on astrology. Basically, the saying is as above, so below. It's like we can see what is planned for us, either we planned for us or our karma planned for us or whatever, but the mechanics of it is like we deal with 12 constellations of the ecliptic, and each constellation deals with a planet that rules it, and there's houses also. We're dealing with 12 houses, 12 constellations, and not necessarily 12 planets, but we can call it 12 planets or luminaries. And Aries would rule something in particular, and the first house deals with that same instance of Aries, and the planet Mars also deals with that same energy in a similar way. And as these things rotate at different speeds, we can translate the meaning of, rather than Mars being in the first planet, similar meaning, which would be an out of athletic energy, the person being athletic or very gung-ho in what they do in life. Now it goes into the second house, and we can see they apply that energy in a way of perhaps obtaining things that they value, which may or may not be money, but it usually is the second house. Third house would be short trips, communication, things of that nature, writing. Fourth house, something to do with the home. The person might apply that energy in being a real estate agent. And then you can deal with the other planets as how they go through all that. So that's sort of basically what it is. Eleanor, that is your chart.
Oh.
Now, well, today, the Sun and Jupiter are conjunct, okay? This would happen once in a year because, of course, the Sun takes, or we take, 1 year to go around in a circle. But we look at it, we say the Sun because it's how we look at things, how we perceive things. So the Sun and Jupiter are conjunct. Jupiter is looked at as being the greatest benefit, okay? Not necessarily. It's growth. It causes all things to grow. So in your chart, the Sun and Jupiter are conjunct in your first solar house. And Jupiter is one of your ruling planets. It used to be the old ruling planet of Pisces, but now Neptune is. But Neptune moves so slowly, it's easier to look at Jupiter. So the Sun and Jupiter, your ruling planet, Jupiter, is in your first house. So this is going to be a very important year for you, meaning a year from now. And in May 2023, Uranus, which takes 86 years to go around the zodiac, is conjunct your Jupiter, your ruling planet, in your third house of writing. This means you have something like that. You want to go to the casino and put some money down.
This is the second time you've said that to me. So, when am I supposed to go to the casino and put this money down?
Well, what this really means, the way I'm looking at it, is you're obviously a writer. You're into writing. Third house is about writing and communication. So I think it's May the 21st, 2023 at about 10 in the morning. You might get a contract or something regarding writing or something very fortunate here.
You heard it here first, listeners.
I
As I said, Uranus takes 86 years to do this, so some of us don't have this in our lifetime, okay?
Wow, okay.
And the other thing is that it has to be guaranteed in your chart anyway. Me, I get a lucky thing. I spend $5 on a scratch-off. I win $10, so I get $5, right? I was up in Ontario 2 years ago, and I had a similar contact. I played a 2-cent machine, and I just pulled the lever for the 2 cents. The whole thing went crazy. I won $386 on one pull.
Wow.
So, but what I'm going to is like on Donald Trump's chart, it shows wealth. It shows wealth. It's guaranteed in his life he's going to be wealthy. In my chart, it relates mainly to dealing with the occult and spirit and ghost things that go bump in the night. That's where my blessing is, if one is to call it a blessing. Sometimes it's not. So that's something very brief on your own, and I could even go into something else and give you day-to-day forecasts. In my daughter's chart, when this, in a progressed chart, Saturn and Mercury became conjunct, she started falling down, and she had a brain tumor, and she's now in a wheelchair.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But does that mean that happens to everyone? No, because the people born on the same date as her, same year, it didn't happen to them. So why did it happen to her? Well, she was premature, quite a bit premature, and she ended up with a growth on the brain stem. It doesn't quite get absorbed into the body as it would in the child in the womb, and it becomes a tumor. So because she was a preemie, then it happened to play out.
Okay. So should I be doing anything specific for that May 21st, 2023 episode?
First, certainly buy a lottery ticket.
Am I buying it on that day?
At least rub off the numbers or whatever that day. Yeah, or if you're buying a ticket, make it for that day. But I would think, in looking at your chart, it's going to be some kind of good award for writing or publishing. Certainly very good. You got some good dates coming up.
Oh. Well, Richard, you are fascinating.
One last, for instance, on how you can use it to plan. 3 years ago, I noticed that Jupiter was about to enter my 8th house. And the 8th house is other people's money, inheritances, insurance awards, things of that nature. And I remembered I'd been trying to get an award from the Canadian military for a disability I had in a parachuting injury. And said, well, looks like the energy is going to be with me. So I filed again. And strangely enough, around the date I filed, they changed the award to quite a bit of money. And this particular thing is like amnesia and PTSD and other things. They weren't in the program. Now they were. So I just planned my trip to Canada and going to Ottawa and talking to people that are in charge of these things on the certain dates that I had benefits. And then I was given quite a large award. So You can use this for planning out whatever situation you have in life, is my point on that.
Right.
One day I had something in my chart. It was Mars conjunct Mercury in Gemini. And I said to myself, I heard a little explosion this morning. I wonder if I've got a flat tire. I went outside, and not only did I have a flat tire, I had 2 flat tires. Because Gemini is the sign of the twins. 2 things happened, okay, at once. What had happened was a snow plow had gone around, had hooked his plow into a pothole, and the plastic thing underneath the plow broke off and went through both my rear tires.
That's incredible, and you're very passionate about this and very firmly believe that you can rely on an astrological system to give you dates and times and accurate foretellings of your future. Is there a simple way that our audience and our listeners sort of quick how-to on how to read their own chart or how to maybe tell
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I get very frustrated sometimes in England. If you're going to be a psychic or an astrologer, you have to go to the police station and get a license. You have to tell the constable on duty the name of his parents, his grandparents. You've got to talk to them, give them messages, and then, hey, okay, you're good. You've got a license. Here, anybody can practice it. The best way to answer your question, I would tell you, is to buy your own astrology program, and a professional astrology program, and they will run maybe $100 to $200, as long as you're not selling reports to your friends. If you're selling reports to your friends, then the company wants more money from you. You're opening a business. But it's for your own use and just giving advice to your friends. You can pay $150, and it comes with lessons. And if you click on something, it'll tell you what it means in general, okay? They're not going to be like the way I learned and you would learn in dealing with your own chart. I'm most accurate with my own chart because I know what's going on in my life. What is the play that you're part of? What is going on in your life, okay? So then you can look at the play in an astrological format and see when this bad cycle is going to end. When will the good cycle end? It's all cycle. Everything's a cycle. It's a huge clock. The solar system is just a huge clock. And if you really want to get into it, the galactic center, I think, is, if it comes from here, is 23 degrees Sagittarius. And the signaling from the galactic center, the Milky Way, seems to produce all this, coming through Jupiter and then to the sun, and then to our ruling planet, and then to the sun, and then to us. So it's just a huge clock. There is a huge program, but it's not real. This is not real. Some people could ask, how could there be a loving God when we see all this suffering in the world? We could philosophize and say, well, if God is all powerful, he's not all good. Or if God is all good, he's not all powerful. Well, there's an answer. It's not real. It's a movie. We're going to wake up when our time comes, and we're going to realize in that last split second that took 80 years in the other alternate reality, and now is over, in this life, I have a disabled daughter, and I'm pushing her around in my wheelchair, and then when this ends, I'm going to see that she is behind me, pushing me in my wheelchair. That was her message, perhaps. In other words, it's all going to be a play that ends, and we have learned something from it. Everything is a great consciousness that we can all relate to. See, I can really go on. In quantum mechanics, there's supposedly like 9 different realities. At each point in your life, when you made a decision either to marry a person or not, well, in one of those realities, you did or did not, and you can access that. You're the other self.
So, Richard, you don't believe in a higher power. You believe in the planets and the universe influencing our life's events.
That's a good question, but no, I do not. And I'll tell you why, and I'll also tell you how that other form can be accessed.
Before you do that, Richard, to explain to the listening audience, we're talking about alternate realities and alternate dimensions, and that's versions of the original timeline where one key part of the past went down differently and have been likened to sprouting as from each other like on branches of a bush. And so you're going to tell us essentially the reason for alternate dimensions and explain that for us, correct?
I wish I knew the answer. I just find myself immersed in it sometimes. I can walk down a street that I know very well, and this happened to me just 2 years ago when I was in Ontario, and I had an apartment in this little town, and there was a Bank of Montreal and the TD Bank and whatever was there, but the stores had changed. Completely different from what was there the day before. What was in the windows was different. And let me tell you, it's not, it's disconcerting when these things happen. And what some people say that are looking at, I guess it's quantum mechanics or these different realities, where you need an observer. An observer changes the way a problem is being looked at, a research, that you want to know the results of an experiment. And it's different if there's an observer there rather than just something measuring it electronically. You take the observer away, you get a different result. So consciousness is affecting reality. Okay? It's like people that are delving into a darker side of the occult. Well, they're going to attract that to them.
That's a fascinating perspective. It's sort of like we are almost our own masters of our own universes. So I want to kind of get deeper into that. So you mentioned alternate dimensions and then parallel universes. Is there a difference between a parallel universe and an alternate dimension? Because when we talk about these kinds of things, I'm thinking of movies from popular culture. You might have heard of Donnie Darko, the new Matrix movie. Another one that comes to mind is a recent movie I saw called Palm Springs, about a couple who are stuck in a time loop. So are these different, or are they the same thing when we're talking about time loops, parallel universes or realities, and then alternate dimensions?
I really couldn't say. I don't know. I'm really like an ordinary person. I'm not a scientist. I'm not highly educated, but I have this ability to go through these different things. What does come to my mind, you speaking of movies, is one of the original science fiction movies, Forbidden Planet, where Walter Pidgeon is the star and they land on this planet Altair 5, and the beings that live there are all gone. And they basically did themselves in, where they could hook themselves up to a machine and they could create things from thought. And they didn't take into account the creature from the id, the darkness, that thing that happens in nightmares. Not that I want to go there at all. That's not, all I'm saying is that our consciousness does tend to create our reality.
Okay. So do you mean to say that if we have that power of positive thinking and we create that positivity in our mindset that we will live positively.
Yes, I would say that. But another way of looking at it is, according to this, we should be able to change our reality. Like if it's raining out, we can make it stop raining, make the sun shine and all that. But the thing is, reality is a group effort, and it must be in agreement with everybody else, okay? You get a group of people meditating, they can tend to create something, I suppose.
So you had said you didn't necessarily go to school for astrology, but clearly you're very well informed and you've done your research. So I'm curious to know, what was it that got you involved in astrology in the first place?
You're very good at this, interviewing. We didn't talk before this, and you're asking the right questions for me. What had happened was that I can just ask for something, and it happens. I was asking questions at one point, and I asked for a teacher to come to me. And so I'm in bed, basically asleep, and I wake up. There's a light in the room. And on the rug in my bedroom is sitting a man, quite portly, had a white turban and yellow clothing. And I looked up at him, and he said, "Richard, we are going to the library at Alexandria, and we are going to show you some things." And he got into the first book of Zol. I remember the title. Zol, it was as in Z, okay, rather than S for sun, but it may represent the sun, the first book of the sun, so that, who knows. But what he had told me at the time was just a brief sentence that opened everything up. And it was, the soul of the child that is about to be born enters the child in the womb at sunrise. So when you make a chart, you don't need to worry so much about the birth time, as many people don't know it. But you put the sun on the ascendant at sunrise, and that's when the soul enters the child's body. And that will give you the astrological chart of what the child will be doing through this lifetime. And I'll throw something else that came out because of this. A woman I knew had a lot of guilt over having an abortion a few years, or she would keep saying, "Oh, he would be this age now, he'd be that age now." And she asked me if I would do a journey for her. It's called a journey, to get an answer. And I was told, "Richard, the answer is very plain. The soul would not choose to incarnate in the flesh of a child that would be aborted. It would choose another birth." And I thought that was a beautiful answer, right? So get a lot of useful information. So it's like I got a lot of information from these brief things.
Your very first experience with something like this, and if so, how long ago was that?
Well, my first experience with this would have been when I was very young. I didn't think much of it. I was born in England, as Eleanor mentioned, in a town called Corsham. And my father was in the Radar Research Institute at Rudloe Manor. You can go on YouTube. All your viewers, listeners, they know Rudloe Manor in Corsham. Well, my father was a chief research scientist there. He'd served in the RAF from the age of 15 to where he had gotten sick in 1945. And they put him in the radar research establishment. And one day, I'm looking out the back window of our house at this place, and there's a red light in the sky. I must have been 6 or 7 years old. I said to myself, "That's strange. The sun's on the back of the house today. It's usually in the front." So now the front, and there's the sun. Going on the back, there's this red light in the sky just sitting there. So that was kind of my first thing. I would also add in the book, The Light Over Britain by White Eagle. I think it's on, I don't know why I'm saying this, page 49 or something. I haven't read it in years. It mentions the red light. This couple driving their car saw this red light over Hungerford Road in Corsham in 1949. And that's the light my sister and I were looking at. That's considered like the Area 51 of England, where a lot of these crops.
You said that was the area where a lot of the crop circles had surfaced.
Yeah.
So, Richard,
Yeah,
what do you
and of
think
course-
that light was?
Well, we've got all these lights in the sky and there's crop circles being evident as we speak, I'm sure, at least in warmer weather, but it doesn't seem to mean much. But it's energies. I'll give you another point that a message and you can even research this, your listeners can research it. There is a green light, a plasma that comes from the moon, circles the Earth, and is either absorbed or dissipated or something on a new moon. The scientists know this, and you should be able to Google it and find it. And the whole amazing part of all this, as to whether there is a physical creator or not, can be seen in the fact that the moon appears to be the sun's size as the sun. Even though one is 93 million miles away, the other is 250,000 miles away. If there was a matter of a couple of 100 feet difference either way, it wouldn't mean an eclipse. It wouldn't happen. It's so amazing. But there's something out there. So you asked me about my first experience. That's only one of them. Of course, in England and Ireland, there's a lot of things. In Iceland today, a lot of things to do about gnomes, pixies, elves. It's just the energy of living things as we see them. It's like something to do with like Kirlian photography, where you cut off a leaf of a plant while it's on there and you take a photograph. Well, the energy of the part of the leaf you cut off is still evident in the photograph. The leaf is whole in the picture, even though you cut off part of the leaf. There's an energy in consciousness that I don't know if it's eternal or not, but it becomes part of the whole, and we can access that. Ancestors' energy, their thinking, we can talk to them. This is where you get spiritualism from. I just find it absolutely amazing. And I got into cards and other things, but I like the idea of the physical, scientific accuracy of astrology. In other words, my emotions don't get involved with it.
I think it's really interesting that you said you had your first, I had a feeling you were going to say that you started having experiences young, because in a lot of my mom's books, she's interviewed a lot of people, and it's like 9 times out of 10, the person sees ghosts for the first time, or they're exposed to paranormal events, or something that's not quite what people see day to day. It's outside the realm of what we consider normal when they're rather young. And it's almost, as Mom has described before in some of her books, it's almost like kids have a sixth sense toward to this kind of thing. But I know my mom and I were both wondering. You had mentioned that you can move in and out of dimensions, sort of like that Twilight Zone episode of the little girl lost, right, who goes in and out of the dimension. In that case, she didn't mean to, but it sounds like you do it purposefully. So my question to you is, how does one start going in between dimensions? And what was your most significant and impactful experience?
Well, I could get into the story of my grandfather, but I find something in my memory that's more to do with your question. I think we all have this when we're born. It's just that in the mud of the world that we have today of physical possessions or whatever, it's pretty well drummed out of us, either in school or even by our parents, or perhaps even religious teachers that think it's not a good thing to happen. So we're ostracized for that ability of a child having a friend they talk to that nobody else can see. I'm retired from the United States Department of Homeland Security, where I was a supervisor of Philadelphia International Airport, and I would use astrology, using everybody's birth dates at different checkpoints to see where a problem might happen and at a certain time, okay? I was able to predict events, and I was given a phone number to call for when I came up with certain things, which I did. I could tell you some funny stories on that. The point being, at one time there was a plane that went down in Long Island Sound, TWA 800, or I think, and some people were saying a missile took it down, and there's all kinds of stuff going on about it. So I did a journey on it, and I just laid down. And the idea, of course, is that the light coming from anything is always out there somewhere. All you have to do is to catch up to that light and pop into it and look inside. So I caught up to the light and looked inside. Well, I was out in space, I was flying along, and I caught up to this 747, I thought it was, and I checked the markings on it. This was the plane that had gone down. And I stuck my head through the outside wall into the plane, and I looked around, and coming towards me is a woman with a red blouse, blue skirt, and it said Iraq Airways. Well, that was strange. And then she went into the ladies' room. I stuck my head through the door in there, and she flushed something down the toilet like a can of hairspray. It went down the toilet and ended up going between like two fuel tanks, or the main fuel tank, which is unpressurized, and the can exploded, burst open, and then the plane exploded. So I mentioned this to the authorities, and they said, Richard, that's not bad, because the prior owner of this aircraft was Iraqi Airways. So maybe what I was seeing wasn't exactly what had happened, but apparently what I would get from this is something might have been left on the plane, either on purpose or accidentally, when it was in the possession of Iraqi Airways, and then for some reason it exploded either on purpose or not. Who's to say? I don't know. Mm-hmm. Give you an idea of what can be done. And the one way to start it is just a drum beat, shamanic drumming. How does a person start doing it? Quite easy. When you're driving your car, shift your awareness into the person driving the car in front of you. And look through their eyes. And as that car goes around a corner, try to take a snapshot of the first thing they see, but you don't see yet. You're not around the corner. Start off with what color did they see first? And then you can work up to what color car, what kind of car? Was it a pickup truck? And you'll be amazed. First time you try, you say, I saw the color red with a green stripe across it. So you go around that same corner, and there's a billboard is red with a green stripe across it. So it's like a shifting of awareness. Get out of yourself into something else kind of thing.
Is it similar to out-of-body experiences?
Yeah, in a way it is. Because you can talk to somebody on the telephone and they may be in another state. You just shift your awareness where you're standing next to them and look at what they're wearing and then say something on the phone. Are you wearing a blue dress? Do you have a tablecloth that's red and white checkered? They say, well, yes, I am. How did you know? Well, you just got a feeling for it. You may not have seen it. Sometimes you see it. Sometimes you feel it.
I see.
So, yeah,
It sounds like it's meditation that can take you to that point or place in your mind where you are given the mental capability to be able to kind of go there, to be able to access this higher power, this higher knowledge that comes from a very spiritual place. So that's really, really interesting. Thank you for sharing your experiences and sort of giving the audience a bit of know-how, because I'm sure, we're going to have some of our viewers and listeners trying that.
I've read that there's evidence that physicists can use experimental data to discern the nature of these elusive dimensions. And there are quite a few documented cases of people claiming to have gone to alternate realities. In 2006, there was a woman named Carol Chase McElhenney, and she was driving through San Bernardino, California, to spend a few days at a sheepdog trial in Paris, California. And she saw a road sign for nearby Riverside. Her family roots were put down in Riverside in the early 1800s, so she decided she wanted to go and visit some familiar places, such as her old house and the cemetery where her grandparents were buried. She attended the dog trial and then drove to Riverside to have like a little mini vacay. And she couldn't find anything familiar. Her street wasn't the same. The bungalows with the small yards looked the same age as her old house, but the numbers weren't right.
There you go.
Her house wasn't there. None of the houses looked familiar. They all looked different. Then she drove to the street where her grandmother once lived, stopped the car, looked around, and she couldn't find her grandmother's houses. None of the houses were anything like she remembered. She couldn't even find the cemetery where her grandparents were buried. It was just not there. And she was really confused about that. And I just can't imagine how this happens. It's so perplexing to me.
Yeah, it is. As I said, it can be disconcerting. I don't have any answers for that other than what I've said. It's like you get more questions the closer you get to it.
I definitely have a question as a follow-up to what Mom was talking about. Is it possible to get stuck in an alternate dimension? And have people gotten stuck, and is there a way out?
Well, that happened one of my first experiences. Actually, it was my first experience with shamanic drumming. What happened was I left my body and ended up on the moon. It's not like a dream. I mean, you're there. You're there. You get into this stuff, you're there. It's not like people are saying, oh, it was a lucid dream. No, you're there. And I was on the moon, and what the heck am I doing here? What happened? And I had no knowledge of anything. I'm on the moon.
Wow.
And I was terrified, and I couldn't get back to my body. I couldn't get back. And time went on, and time went on. And then I felt a wind. But it was me exhaling like that. Me exhaling in this reality on my bed in the shamanic trance. I followed that wind, and I was back in my body.
How much time had elapsed during that experience?
I don't know. You're totally shaken. I mean,
and as I understand this, there is no time really. It's like there is no time, and,
yes,
and from what I understand,
exactly.
you need to just relax and calm down and release that fear for you to refocus, because I think that's part of what it is that I've been told.
You say things once in a while, both of you, that remind me of something. At one point, I asked, what does it feel like to be God? Not the power that God would have, but what sensation does God have? Him, her, itself, whatever that is, that greater force. What do they feel? Well, I'll tell you, it came to me, and I just started screaming. There was no gravity. There was no time. There was no sensation. There was nothing but consciousness, pure consciousness. And it's like you're in a constant free fall. What does that mean? I have no idea. I just asked the question. I just ended up screaming.
Earlier, you had mentioned gnomes, fairies, and sort of like mythological creatures. When we look at things that we see in popular culture, like mermaids and things like that, are you saying that you've met some of these mythological creatures in alternate dimensions? You know, we could even go as far as to say, aliens or ghosts or some of these other known, creatures. Have you met some of them?
Certainly spirits and ghosts, not so much something from other planets or dimensions, but certainly gods. In Shinto mythology, the goddess of the sun, the whole thing happened about that, and I studied Shintoism after that. It's not like I read a book on Shintoism and it came to me. Everything that came to me regarding Shinto turned out to be actual fact in the Shinto religion. Norse mythology, Odin, Thor. In Hindu mythology, the monkey god, all of them. I became the monkey god, and when I grew a tail and I was flying through the universe. Tibetan Buddhism. I've met Padmasambhava, but my point on this that I would really like to get people is that I wasn't reading something about it and then my brain conjured up these things. And I would say it can happen. You read something and you're contacting that level of consciousness that's out there, and it will come to you in a valid way. But what if you never read a thing about it because you just never got around to it? And then when you researched it, this is exactly what the gods or goddesses will do when they come to you. It happened to Bruce Lee once in the movie Bruce Lee, where a god representing a samurai warrior came to him and almost killed him. But that's what happens when you're like, should say, accepted into this. It's like you're killed. You're killed in a spiritual way, but you feel it very physically. There may not be pain, pure pain, but you'll feel the heat of something, the cold of something. It's impressed on you that you've been killed to change yourself, perhaps. I mean, I'm sure the psychologists have all kinds of stuff on this, but I don't know. Actually, I'm quite glad this has happened to me, and we haven't even talked about the part that got me really into this. It can be quite terrifying in the beginning, but once you get understanding about it, it's like, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
You were on the moon, and you took this breath, and you exhaled, and came back to your body, and it was like oh my God, thank God I'm back. After such a terrifying experience, why would you ever want to go to an alternate reality ever again?
Yeah, strange, isn't it? Yeah, I just kept going at it. And I could tell you some stories, really, but I did mention the funny thing happened once. Maybe I'll give a quick review of that. Something funny happened when I was at TSA and Homeland Security. The person I answered to, I called him up. He was a captain in the Navy. I said, I know you've got a son in Manhattan. On this particular date, you tell him not to be on the subways. I'm just getting a very bad feeling about the subways on this date. So he calls his son and tells him, oh, we were going to a wedding that day. We're going to take the subway. Well, don't take the subway. Okay, well, he tells his friends, and his friends tell his friends, and the word gets back to the CIA and everybody else that this captain in the Navy who has access to secret information, but he didn't have access to that, told everybody. So they were taking him to jail. Well, I went in there and told the story. No, this is, and I showed them how I did it with astrology, and everybody had a good laugh, and that was all over. So he was on his way to prison, like Guantanamo Bay.
What happened on the subway that day?
Well, nothing, actually, but the thing is there was an alert out from the terrorist group. There would be an attack on the subway that day. There was an alert. It was already out, but they decided to call it off because the word got out and there was a lot of police available checking bags. So apparently, obviously it didn't happen. But the thing is, he was the only one that could have had access to that information. So how did his son get it, right?
Right. Oh, my goodness.
But then they found out I'm the one that told him.
It may be funny looking back on that story now, but at the time I'm sure it was rather serious. And that leads me to my next question. When you are forming these mind experiments, when you are hypnotizing yourself or putting yourself in the right frame of mind in order to travel interdimensionally, are you ever afraid when your spirit is out of your body that perhaps another spirit or another entity could try to occupy your shell?
Yes, that happens quite a bit, but all you have to do is laugh, have a sense of humor. Just laugh at them. They can't stand it. And this happens a lot. I was on a farm last year, and places where there's a lot of animals, blood, butchering, birthing. It attracts a lot of spiritual energy. There's a lot of that kind of stuff there. I just laughed at it. But eventually I left because why be there, right? But that's the best thing because we're supposed to be here doing what we're doing. They're not supposed to be doing that. And in Nichiren Japanese Buddhism, and in Buddhism in general, and in Tibetan Buddhism, especially in the Lotus Sutra, it is stated by these negative forces that once they realize you are who you are, they must protect you, not harm you. Because without human beings, they would not exist, okay? Without us, there would be no ghosts. There would be, I'm wording it very simply here. Maybe I'm not getting the point across, but we have the power to stop them just by, say, go away, leave me alone. But don't have fear. Don't be. There's nothing. In my case, people that I know, when they die, they come to me and say goodbye. Everyone so far, everyone.
Oh, that's interesting.
I had a female friend. She was in Montreal, and I lost touch with her. She came to me December 12th, I guess it was 1996, and said goodbye. That was a little tough. And I called her family in Montreal, and I asked and said, "Oh, she died last night of cancer," and I didn't even know it. I just asked if how's she doing? Can I talk to her? And no, she passed. I didn't get into that she'd come to me.
Sure.
And you'll even get spirit come to you I had a woman and a daughter from Tennessee come to me and ask me to dial a certain number to tell their husband they were okay. Well, I didn't do it. And in some ways, I used to feel guilty for not doing it, but it upsets people. It really does. Because they're never going to accept it anyway. They're not. They're just not. So you're trying to give them some comfort that life continues in some form, and they're saying they're okay. People say, oh, that's a neat trick. How did you do that? I don't really get into it.
A dead woman from Tennessee came to you and asked you to phone up her husband to let her husband know. And you didn't know.
They're okay.
Wow. And you didn't know her husband. You didn't know this woman. She was just asking for, wow. That's mind-blowing.
Well, here's a quick story that comes to me. I was in some parachuting accidents in the military. I ended up having to get a bone transplant in the neck. And the doctor told me he put in coral. So I got home after the recuperation period, and I had a dream. And I'm in the French Foreign Legion. And here comes the soldier coming down the stairs. He trips and falls and breaks his neck. And then his spirit comes to me and gives me his name. And he says, you have my neck, my vertebra that was transplanted into you. I'm from Red Bank, New Jersey, and he gave me his name. So next time I went to see the surgeon, I told him the story. He says, that's pretty good. He says, because I'll tell you, I told you it was coral. It wasn't. People don't want to hear it. It's a bone from a cadaver. We tell them it's coral. Why don't you write the French Foreign Legion and ask them? And this is the answer I got from the French Foreign Legion. Mon cher Richard, Monsieur Clarkson. And well, in English. Because you are not a direct relative of the person you name, we cannot give you any information on this person. However, if he was never in the Legion, we would be able to tell you. Unfortunately, we are unable to tell you that. Good luck in your ghost hunting, Captain Gerard, 2nd Parachute Regiment, French Foreign Legion. So we're unable to tell you that he was never here. Now, I did try to find the family. Apparently, a lot of young men from Red Bank, New Jersey joined the French Foreign Legion. I don't know why. But,
isn't that funny? Wow.
Yeah, Red Bank, New Jersey.
Well, listen, if you don't mind going into your astrological radar, can you maybe give us a prediction of some sort that would be able to be something that the listeners could really look forward to see if it comes to fruition?
I was going to tell the Dalai Lama, but I was asked to move along in our group. I mean, I didn't have a private audience with him, but I spoke to him. I gave him my name. I was about to go into I was going to tell him that there was a pandemic coming. And this was November 2019, just before it all started. And I said that because Pluto was entering Aquarius. Pluto represents death. And as it goes through the different signs, you can see what's going to happen. You can predict it. When Pluto was in Sagittarius, Sagittarius represents royalty and long-distance travel. And what happened then? Diana died, Princess Diana, and the Concorde crash. In a silly situation, Pluto in Libra, fashion died. We had Nehru collars and bell-bottom trousers and men with lace cuffs and big bouffant hairdos. So as Pluto goes through different things, the last one is Pluto in Capricorn is the most recent. This happens every 200 years. So what happened 200 years before? 200 years before Pluto entered Capricorn, the United States declared independence from England. And in the United States, we had President Trump come in and really upset the status quo and wanted to basically declare independence from the United States as it was. The businesses were changed, all kinds of things. It was a similar kind of energy. Capricorn is business, so Pluto is the death of business. So in 1776, we have different things going on that's in the history books. We have the start of the American Stock Exchange. Hello? We have the British trying to end slavery before, right? The Declaration of Independence. The British ended in 1812. And the United States knew we would have to go along with that unless we declared independence. So you can see I can tell you a lot about that regarding American history.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard that Pluto brings periods of creation followed by periods of disaster. And then, as you had mentioned, cycles before, the cycle repeats. Is that true?
Oh, some people could say that. I see it as, first, we must realize that death is not a negative thing. It's an ending of something. We could say it's the beginning of something else. I'm not so sure. I gave a talk at the Sara in Dharamsala, India, to the professors of astrology in Tibetan Buddhism. And I thought they just followed the planets out to Saturn. They don't. They told me, no, Pluto has 10 times the power of any other planet. When I explained to them something, which I guess I shouldn't get into here. But where I'm going with this is, what does each thing represent? Well, Capricorn was business. What is Aquarius? Aquarius is the human being carrying a jar of water, but he's pouring out water, meaning pouring out emotions. So Aquarius is really the sign for humanity, for mankind, and our sense of compassion. So Pluto is death, okay, in this, or ending. So we're not even in Aquarius yet. Pluto's still in Capricorn, but Saturn, which rules Capricorn, is in Aquarius, which sucked it in. So now we have the pandemic, and we may be heading towards something very serious with Russia and Ukraine. Very serious. I'm not predicting anything. I don't know. I don't see it getting much better. I wonder what the heck they're doing with Chernobyl. One thing we must remember then, when Gorbachev was asked by President Reagan, take down this wall, that was 1989 when a lot of things happened. Then we got the meltdown it was 1986, the meltdown at Chernobyl, and Gorbachev was reading the Bible. And I'm no Bible thumper. I'm not even sure I'm a Christian or what religion I am. I don't know. But what he was reading in Russian, the verse where a star falls from heaven and its name is wormwood. Chernobyl is Russian for wormwood. And that was the star exploding. So here we are back again at Chernobyl, right? Well, what's going on here?
Of course, a lot of us know we've all been dealing with the frustrations of the pandemic for a couple years now. I'm going to challenge you a little bit here. To my mom's point, do you have a prediction of something that's going to happen that you know for sure? You absolutely have seen it in the stars. It's written, predestined to happen.
No, I work with individuals' charts as to what's going on. In general, what is happening, of course, we entered the age of Aquarius when Jupiter conjuncted Saturn in Aquarius on December 22nd. And that represents the coming of seeing God in a particular way. When Jupiter conjuncted Saturn, September 20th, 7 BC, Christianity started under the sign of the fish, which is the sign for Pisces, the Piscean god, right? The fisher of men. And what we had before that, the 2,000 years, was the sign of Aries. It goes backwards. And that was represented by the ram, Aries the ram, and of course in the Hebrew religion, the shofar, the blowing of the shofar we could go back 10,000 years to the age of Leo, and 10,000 years ago, we have the Sphinx that had the lion's head on it at the time. I know the Sphinx isn't that old, but they're saying now that the age determination of the lion itself is like 10,000 years ago. We have the age of Taurus, the bull, the Minotaur. You can go back through all these ages. So again, what does the age of Aquarius represent? I think it represents the coming of, and I don't like it, the coming of robotics, the coming of a new person where we can basically be plugged in and get all the knowledge of the universe in a computer chip. Not just learning a language, be total knowledge. Total knowledge. Imagine that in a human being. So it's like the Aquarian symbol pouring out emotions. So are we going to lose compassion? Are we going to lose emotion? I don't know. But it represents the ending of something, for sure. And yes, a starting of something. I don't know. What I would tell you, yes, I do have something for you, and I'll answer your question. What have I seen? I asked a question about global warming and the climate. I ended up flying, and I turned next to me, and there's a raven next to me. And I'm also a raven. And it turned and looked at me, and it was my face. Now, the two ravens are Hugin and Munnin, thought and memory. They're the two ravens of Odin that fly around the world each day to see how his people are doing, to see if children are good or bad. Okay? This is where Santa originally came from. So flying over the earth, and the time period is like 30 years. And I saw just few groups of people, and the earth was basically burned. And they're living under tents in large holes dug in the ground. The idea being the moisture in the earth rises up at sunrise and the dew forms under the tent, and then it's caught in buckets down the end. That's what I saw, like 30 years. Now, that's already happening in some country, right? That's already happening in some countries. Some people have no water. So that's what I see. I really think it's too late to do anything about it. I apologize to any listeners, and I've been wrong on some things, but I think it's too late. And even yesterday, the New York Times, some scientists, they're no longer going to gather data, mainly because no one's doing anything about it, and they feel that it won't get any better.
When you're traveling interspiritually, interdimensionally, are you able to communicate with, animals as well?
Well, all this is really a thought form. It's not so much a language. It's like getting on an elevator at a hospital and you can tell somebody's got their arm broken in two places in a cast. You just feel it. You feel something. You feel knowledge. There's not really a communication. Although lately I've been getting a lot of voices at night reading a book to me. Somebody's reading to me at night here.
And I appreciate the clarification. It sounds to me that with other animals, other beings, again, you get more of an emotional sense from them, as you said, as opposed to actually being able to speak directly or communicate in that regard. So really, you're just getting a sense of their psyche, sense of their
emotions. With animals, their life is mainly existence, thirst, hunger, warm, cold, that kind of thing. Although one time I considered myself a bee shaman. There's a spiritualist church in Sparta, New Jersey, where I would give some instruction, and I'd learn some things where we had bees' nests in the attic. And they told me that they're going to have an exterminator come in and get rid of them. So I said, well, let's do a spirit canoe first one night, and we'll ask them to leave. So everybody lines up like you're in a canoe, and I beat the drum. And we went up to the attic in an altered state and explained that if they don't leave, then exterminator's coming. And the next week, and it was going to happen on a Monday, so the next Sunday we go in there, and we're having a service. We start hearing this buzzing upstairs. And all these bees, they come down from the attic through where we're sitting and out through the windows. They left. And there was some communication going on there where it was you and I speaking. People have a spirit animal you've heard of, like somebody has a wolf or a deer. Maybe they're able to communicate more directly than I would.
No, but that's very interesting. And I don't know that I've ever heard anything like that before.
I know you said you deal specifically with individual charts, and I know that you've been reading mine. So tell me, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I'm also curious to see what my mom's chart says as well.
Well, what's happening here is, as I mentioned before, the main thing is the sun is conjunct Jupiter now and tomorrow in Eleanor's first house. And that's very significant for what's going to happen through the year. It's good fortune. Jupiter is growth, but it's also putting on weight. Okay? So you want to be careful, watch your weight. But Jupiter also rules the ninth house, which is publishing. So this is going to just come ordinarily to you anyway. But again, the main thing is next May 2023, you've got something coming up there regarding publishing, I think. Lots of new friends you've had this year, the last few years. You want to watch out in relationships where you tend to attract aggressive men, people. You got to watch out for that. That's in life, okay? You have Mars, Pluto, and Uranus in your seventh house, which is an unusual grouping in a seventh house. Uranus would be an Aquarian. You would be attracted to an Aquarian or a Scorpio or an Aries, which is strange because they're totally different.
Oh, yeah.
people.
Well, I'm an Aries, and she and I butt heads all the time, so you couldn't have, you're right about that.
Okay. Was your father or mother a Sagittarian or a Gemini?
My mom was a Capricorn, and my dad was January 8th. He was a Capricorn too, I guess that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm not using a birth time here. Usually the sign that's on the 10th house cusp is the father or the most important parent. And if the sun and moon are conjunct, it means that one parent acted as both. In other words, the father may have left the family and the mother's doing both jobs kind of thing when they're conjunct. I don't see that here. I'm not saying it is. But you do have Saturn and the sun conjunct in your chart, which I think you might get a feeling of being held back, which gives you the force to push forward, okay? In my chart, I have Saturn and Mars conjunct, and Mars represents my third house, which is driving, and Saturn would be resistance. Now, I could be driving down a road and not see any other car for hours. Here comes my turn, left turn. Just when I get there, I have to stop because there's a car coming. And if I pulled over on the side after making the turn, I could wait there a day or two if this was Idaho, and nobody would be coming. And then when I pull out again, I'd stop. Here comes the car, I gotta wait for them to go by. Every intersection, no matter what, I could be in the Sahara, there would be a car coming, and I would make the turn. There's worse things in this world, I know, but Saturn conjunct Mercury would mean something like that. In my daughter's chart, when this in her progressed chart, Saturn and Mercury became conjunct, she started falling down, and she had a brain tumor, and she's now in a wheelchair. But does that mean that happens to everyone? No, because the people born on the same date as her, same year, it didn't happen to them. So why did it happen to her? Well, she was premature, like quite a bit premature. And she ended up with a growth on the brain stem. It doesn't quite get absorbed into the body as it would in a child in the womb, and it becomes a tumor. So because she was a preemie, then it happened to play out.
So should I be doing anything specific for that May 21st, 2023 episode?
First, certainly buy a lottery ticket.
Am I buying it on that day?
Or at least rub off the numbers or whatever that day. Yeah, or if you're buying a ticket, make it for that day. I would think, in looking at your chart, it's going to be some kind of good award for writing.
Well, tell me, Richard, if any of the listeners would like to get a chart made up of their own personal chart by you, how could they get in touch with you?
I can give out my email if anybody wants it, but I don't charge money for it. A lot of people, I was doing this for a living once. If you see something negative coming up and you warn people, they didn't even want to pay you. But, he gave me a terrible reading. And if they call a couple of months later, I said, well, what happened on that day? They said, you were absolutely right. I said, but meanwhile, they've gone around telling everybody they got a bad reading. So, yeah, if somebody wants a little advice, I can look at their chart for them or whatever, but I wouldn't charge anything.
If anyone would like to reach out to Richard, they can contact me on my email, and then I'll connect them with you. And my email is AuthorEleanorWagner@gmail.com.
Yeah, that works. I'd rather be in a position where I'm teaching some of this stuff like we're talking tonight. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard, for sharing your time with the audience today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I really look forward to having you on the show again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Eleanor.
Thank you, Richard.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ghostly listeners, you can follow me on my website, AuthorEleanorWagner.com, where there are links to my books and video updates and photographs from all the Lady Ghostbuster investigations. Also, you can sign up or level up on my Author Eleanor Wagner Patreon program. That's Patreon, where you will find special bonus opportunities only available to its patrons, such as one-on-ones with me and co-hosting opportunities on episodes of Eleanor Wagner's Strange and Scary World podcast. Thank you, paranormal enthusiasts, for tuning in today. I hope you'll come back again. Remember to tap into your own gifts. Everyone has them. And in the meantime, make sure you're creeping it real.